This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so call the meeting to order.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. This is the scheduled meeting of the zoning committee.
Zoning
board.
Planning and zoning.
Planning and zoning, because I wasn't sure what we're called. We're called two different things in the UDO. Due to a lack of quorum, there's only three.
We should probably do a roll call.
Well,
Oh,
And then
to
have
make
people
sure
respond
we
to roll
know
call.
that we don't have a quorum.
okay,
Booker, Emmer,
yes.
Eubank,
Yes.
Coney, McDougal, Pitney.
Yes.
So there's three of us here. It's a seven-member board. We don't have a quorum, so we cannot have a formal meeting. Since we're here, I intend to bounce some ideas off the other members to give them something to think about prior to our next meeting, things that I haven't brought up before. But we're not going to take any final action. We're not going to take any formal action because we do not have a quorum.
So, and some of these things, I think we need Mike and Dennis to hear and also give input. So I don't want to have too much an in-depth conversation tonight because we're just going to rehash it.
Okay, so that's fine. And I've laid it out and some of it, what I've given you, so I didn't know if you collected fees or not.
Yeah.
And I do know that the proposed ordinance had a provision for an appraisal. The applicant was supposed to submit an appraisal to inform the board as to whether or not the project would have a negative effect on property values in the neighborhood. And that's what got me into my board of review stuff, where what we did at the county on the property tax assessment, it wasn't the board of review asking for the appraisal. We had interveners. We had the city of Rockford. We had a group, property tax assessment monitoring committee. The county, the city of Rockford, the Rockford School District, Rock Valley College, Rock River Water Reclamation District, Rockford Park District. We pulled some money to get appraisals because the board of review had contacted us years prior. Appraisals were coming in from the property owners. This is $100,000 more. So it's the big ones, the J.C. Penney, it's the Bergners or whatever. It's the property's worth millions of dollars. They get an appraisal from them and they kind of look at it, is this biased or not? But they have nothing else to look at. And they did not have a budget on their own to be able to get appraisals. So this committee was formed so that on the large issues, you would have appraisals from both sides if necessary.
And I remember when that was put together because that was going to help places like Pecatonica and Winnebago and places like that where they wouldn't have the funding. This consortium, this group would be able to pay for it.
And I've seen the same thing here. If it's important enough to have an appraisal done, first off, I don't think it should be the applicant because the applicant will hire, the appraiser knows who hired him. And they tend to err on the side of the person who's paying them. So to get a objective appraisal, I think it needs to be the village going out and contacting somebody or possibly contacting two. So then you would really get a fair idea if there is a decrease in value. Now, if you don't think it's necessary, then, should it be in here? If it is necessary, I think you should give the other side time to get a counter appraisal.
Two points. One is if it ever comes to that point where the zoning board or the village believes an appraisal is needed for the zoning board or the village board to make a decision, that can be determined by that particular board. Also, that board is in control of how quickly that issue is going to progress. It's not like the board of review where they have a timeline and they have to have the hearing by a certain
Well,
time.
not necessarily. In this provides that when they file their application, you're going to have a public hearing within 7 days, no longer than 60, which I think is too short of a period. It's definitely too short of a period if you're going to give property owners a chance to have their say in possible opposition to what the applicant wants. The applicants had forever to put their case together.
Right.
The property owners getting notice, and the notice is gonna say there's gonna be a public hearing on this in 7 days or in 60 days or somewhere in between, which I think is so there is a time frame in there.
we need a time frame and a shorter time frame because we don't want it to languish out there. I mean, we don't want a petitioner to come in and have it set 180 days from now. They're just not gonna want that. So if we put 7 days to 60 days, they're guaranteed a public hearing. We have the right as a zoning board to conduct multiple public hearings. We can have a public hearing and say, okay, we at this point believe that we need. Sorry.
You don't make a mistake with
We-
the healthcare. I just put doctor's appointment tomorrow.
Okay, but we can decide to reschedule another public hearing. If we feel the need to have one, we can say we're setting this over for a continued public hearing based upon the fact we need to have an appraisal. We're gonna set it over for 60 days, 90 days, or 120 days. But we've given the initial public hearing within 7 to 60 days. And I think that's important because the petitioner doesn't want it to just sit there. We can do our public hearing, we can get it to here, and then we can decide at the public hearing what is going on. And if we find that we need additional time, let's say it's like the ethanol plant where we had maybe hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at the gymnasium. And we find out, okay, we're gonna have hundreds and hundreds of people at the initial public hearing. We may continue the public hearing to, number one, have a good facility to put it at, number two, to see what's been actually presented in the meantime in the petition. And if there's an appraisal already in the petition, then fine. If the appraisal doesn't come up until the testimony, then we can say, okay, thank you for that testimony, but now we're going to get an appraisal just to verify. Or maybe another competing,
Okay, and I guess I wasn't thinking of multiple public hearings. If that is a option, I'd like to see it in here. But I also am looking at it more, I'm looking at it more from the viewpoint of the citizens of the village as opposed to the applicant.
right, but again, most of our zoning petitions are very minimal. We may have the occasional larger one, but 95% or 99% of the zoning petitions we have are not gonna require it.
So they just have it set up so the zoning committee or the village board, or they set the time frame, not the ordinance.
Well, the only reason is that the ordinance or is that the application? Because to me.
Well, the ordinance that was drafted has in the application, or the proposed ordinance has in the application that the applicant will set a date for the public hearing.
And part of that is following what the county does. They typically set it within that time frame. So in my mind, again, I feel that we've had a lot of things over the years not progress as quickly as they should through this committee. And so I want to have something that puts a timeline so it lets the applicant know we will take care of it in a timely manner, and lets us know that we have to we're holding our feet to the fire to make sure that we're going to get this progressed.
I just think it's too much of a heat to our feet,
Right.
that we're not protecting the outside. But I just wanted to float the idea for you to think about. I presume you and I are going to have different opinions on a lot
I
of
have to
this.
have a different opinion than you because we need to have that other side.
Right.
So I'm almost. always different from
And
you.
so instead of you and I wasn't going to get into detail. I was just raising things to give you something to think about and give Riley something to think about that I'm going to bring up later at later meetings.
So I agree. I mean, maybe 7 to 60 is not appropriate, but I'm arguing why it should
Yeah.
be. So that everyone can listen and decide where do we think we should go.
And that's where I agree with you totally. Instead of you and I getting into depth tonight.
Yeah.
I think we need the other 2 and hopefully 3 people sometime
Yep, I'm trying to.
to hear it.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that I wanted to think about here. If you read my ideas that I came up with specific comments, I didn't get through the whole thing. Right now, I'm up to the point of the application, and that's where I ran into the appraisal and ran into the time frame for setting a hearing. I know there's gonna be some further sections past then where we have time frames that if there's supposed to be a committee that meets to approve or discuss it, and then there's certain time frames after within 7 days there, which I don't think are workable with the other time frames we're talking about, the 7 to 60, but I haven't finished that yet. And I don't know for sure what Mary's charge is gonna be here, because I also think that one of the major things that we need to talk about is, at the last meeting, I think the consensus was a permitted use in districts 4 and 8, and a special permitted use in agricultural. Well, are you talking about agricultural being number?
It could be 6 or 7.
6 or 7, or 6 and 7, I guess is what we're going to talk about. And then, that's not so important right now, as opposed to, if our recommendation is gonna be permitted and special permitted use, we have to have an ordinance, I think, in place to put some restrictions or qualifications for the permitted use. I don't know if the village just wants to say, it's a permitted use there, you can do anything you want to solar farm, you build the Taj Mahal or something. So I think that we have to look at the ordinance that's in here, but then your special use ordinance on this, I think probably should have some qualifications in it too. And maybe it's as simple as, here's the restrictions for the permitted, and then the special has to meet the permitted plus whatever else comes up.
Right.
And then when you look at the application content, a lot of that was really restrictions on permitted use as opposed to content that I think they really need to put in an application. And so should we look at Mary as drafting an ordinance for solar, which I'm going to refer to as my commercial solar energy generation facility, and then for the special use for allowing the commercial solar generation facility, because those are kind of two separate things.
Right.
And to make it clear, if that's our consensus, that's what we need to pass to the village board, so we need to separate it a little bit. So should we go through this proposal like I've done, I'm starting to go paragraph by paragraph, or should we just stop at the major, where is it? My major topics, where I have some high points, and should we see where we have meetings of minds there as to how high, how big, where they can be seen from and stuff, distances, and give Mary that, so Mary can then bring something new back to us. And I'm almost wondering if that's where we should be, but I don't know. If we just go through the proposed ordinance, I'm just seeing us working on the special use, and we're not putting anything into the ordinance for solar generating facilities as a permitted use. And, I don't need an answer now. These are just things that, in fairness to you, and I guess to be able to get good input, I wanted you to know some of these things I'm thinking about so we can fully discuss them next time. Or whenever we meet. But I think our job will be to give a consensus to the village board, so we have to have hopefully everybody here so we can give a true consensus. So there's lots of other issues that I'm seeing other than rewording what Mary originally came up with, which again is not a criticism. I don't know that you were given
No, and I get,
guidelines. And I know drafting things for the county, if they didn't give me a guideline, I made up something that I thought it should be, or you copied something from somewhere else. If they would tell me what they wanted, it was easier to draft a contract or an ordinance that they wanted, but they gotta give you some direction.
but
So
sometimes,
should we give her general directions or not?
But sometimes too, I think people don't know what they want until they see something and they know, well, that's not what I want,
Right.
and that's fine.
Right, and so that's what I'm wondering, should we just go through these general topics, give you some parameters, and then you come back with something that contains those, has those parameters contained therein?
I'll give you my thoughts and then Riley, if you
Okay.
want to chime in. My thought is I went through the four major topics we talked about last time, and I kept going with that, and you had more specific things, landscaping, fencing, all that kind of stuff. And I went through and made notes. I went through and looked at some model ordinances, I started to look through ours at that time just to see what Mary drafted. I looked at what you had for specific topics.
Yeah,
And I looked at other model solar
Oh, okay.
ordinances, and then I was gonna look at ours to see how
our
draft,
draft, okay, that's what I didn't know what you're talking
okay,
about.
that Mary prepared, and just see what she had. So like the height, 10 to 15 feet is typically what you're seeing as a limit for the height. Some of it is 10 feet if it's gonna be in an open area, 15 feet if it's in residential, because it's gotta go a little higher, because there might be some accessory buildings, whatever. But there's different things that you look at, and it might be good to go through your
Main topics?
main topics and what you have set out for those 8 or 10 things. So we can say, okay, what do we feel about landscaping? What do we think about fencing? And then I went to our zone, UDO, and the zoning part to look at what each zoning category requires for setbacks, what we require for fencing and landscaping and screening, because the thing that we have to remember is whatever we're gonna do for a solar ordinance in terms of restricting for zoning, we have to say, if it's not a solar farm, if it's a regular industrial building, we have to treat it the same way in most respects. So you can't just say, oh, it's a solar farm, we're gonna treat it completely different. We're gonna have it be a 15-mile distance setback because it's a solar farm. Well, that's not rational. That's something that they can fight. So we have to say, if our setback is 150 feet for industrial, then why would we require solar to be farther back? And so we have to have reasons for that. So just whatever we decide to do, if we're gonna do it different for solar, we have to have an explanation as to why it applies to solar. And that's the main thing I want us to think about is, if we're gonna have the same exact setbacks and the same exact things that we currently have in general industrial for solar as we would for any other building, great, we have no problems. But if we're gonna say setback has to be a minimum of 1,500 feet, then we have to come up with a reason why it should be for solar and not for any other industrial use. So
Right.
again,
And there's-
those are things we're gonna wanna think about.
And there's different setbacks, there's setbacks from the street, and there's also distance from residential zoning,
Correct.
because your industrial is not going to
Right.
be adjacent to, and now I think we're getting into.
Right.
But if you want to go through the main topics, I think
Yes.
that's one way of going, and then getting a draft and going through the draft. Because as I'm going through this, I'm getting caught going down holes. You know, I'm getting too depth into this, and I'm looking at this, and I'm wanting to make too many changes, which might not actually be there if Mary was to redraft it with some general guidance. And so I kind of felt in a way I was wasting my time of going through this, looking for words missing or grammar not making sense or something, which I don't think she would have in a draft if we gave her parameters. So I kind of agree that, and that's why I asked everybody else, I guess maybe the next meeting, if anybody has additional major points or topics, we add that to the list, and then we start going through and finding out where we have a consensus on height, distance from residential, distance from the street, site, just site views and such, which would be the landscaping and such. And
Once we have Booker, McDougal, and Cody, I think we'll have like a lot easier getting a general consensus and whatnot, because I know Booker has a lot of thoughts on this too, so, yeah.
so maybe the next time, we'll start with the main points and really not go through this item by item like I originally planned.
Yeah.
And then, once we get the main points, get a redraft, and then we go through the redraft in detail, because what is passed to the village board, as long as I'm chairman, I want that to be in really good form. I want it to be a product that we are not ashamed to give them, that it doesn't have errors in it, it doesn't have holes in it and stuff. A lot of it might be agreed, and others, we might have to give them options. We don't have a consensus on this, here's options. We have a consensus on this, this is how we believe it should be done, and they have the actual wording of it.
And I think that would be very appropriate, sitting on the board side. If zoning comes with a recommendation and maybe split on ag or industrial or both, the board wants to probably see that, because they want to know, okay, what was the zoning board struggling with? And this is what they put together, these two different options, and then the board can weigh in on that and decide which way they want to go.
Which is fine, but I guess I'd be in particular in that I want to all be grammatically correct too. The product that we send through, I want to be in finished form. And this is not at all that way. So that's why I felt like I was kind of wasting a lot of time going through this in detail, but if this is our starting point, I had to do it. If our starting point is going to be more of the big picture with the main points, and then Mary come back with something, then that's the thing we can refine, so it's a well-worded ordinance.
And I think too, though, we would need to look at that just for the purpose of saying, okay, you've got 4 or 5 categories that you want to discuss. But is there something else in there that we just need to cover somehow?
Right.
We don't need any special particular
Well, right.
language, but are you guys okay with this sort of language? Just because there's going to be some other things.
There's a main
that-
topic, should this main topic be in there or not?
Right.
And so, like a lot of it, I was going through with respect to the drafting an ordinance for solar facilities. A lot of what was in the application is not necessary. They don't need to tell us this, this, and this. There's some of them might have to, but a lot of it was not applicable. But yeah, this gave me ideas on different points, and I do agree, that's why I wanted everybody else input as to main points we have to consider. But then we can come up with a consensus with those main points, or when we disagree, we can tell you, then if you can draft it, now we've got something to work with.
And then how do you want to work it? Because obviously not everybody's here, whether you want it, I don't know if it's going to come from you, if you want me to coordinate with Kelly, but I think in order to have a meaningful next meeting, well, there needs to be some packet that goes out to everybody that basically says, okay, remember here, we got this from Bill, we're going to discuss this, here's the.
Well, I guess you can start with this one, the major topics, and come up with your topics. And that's where I was going to start with my questions about the UDO today. And then I was going to find out from you and Irv and Dennis what you intended with respect to the 2 agricultural districts. Was it both or one?
Right.
Then I was going to get to my main topics, explaining that my original idea of going through the ordinance, the draft ordinance in detail, I think is going to, in large part, be a waste of time. There's going to be a lot of what we're going through that's not going to be in the end product. So once we give direction on what we think should be in an ordinance, and Mary put that together, and if we're in agreement with the permitted versus the special permitted, I think that Mary needs to draft 2 things there.
So yeah, Bill, and I don't know if Kelly has your list of the 4 major topics and then the subtopics, but that list should be emailed to all of the zoning board members by next week. So they have 3 weeks to review it, come up with their.
And they already have it unless they, well, I guess
I would
Dennis
send
and Irv didn't have it because they weren't here.
I would send it by email to everybody and just saying, we're gonna go through this, the subtopics at the next board meeting, have your ideas of what you want on each of the subjects. You may wanna consult the UDO, because to compare with what we have. And then I would also send what Mary has together and say, if you would like to look at this, we're going to then incorporate it in this. If you don't want to muddy up the waters and include the draft ordinance, that's fine.
I think they already have
But
that.
again, they may already have it, but I think when it comes again in another email, then they can't say, I don't know where it is, I don't have it. So to me, it's just easier when we get it again and say, here, this is what we're gonna talk about next time.
Yeah, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. I guess to me, it does muddy it up a little bit, because if they get too deep into this,
Well, then,
they're losing sight of
Yeah,
this.
then I would just include that and just say we're gonna go over that.
Yeah, we're going to go, because if that is, I think that's the best way of proceeding right now, is to hit the main points and then give them to the attorney for something to draft. And if, Mary, if you saw something in here that we haven't addressed, tell us at our meeting while we're discussing about it, or while you're drafting it, put it in there. Just don't do it rote. I guess when I was doing it for the county, I would also throw something in if I thought something they should be doing. They could always say, take it out.
Right.
But that's how I felt I was allowing them to make an informed decision, because I was saying, you haven't thought about this issue, you want to put this in. They say, no, it's on, fine.
And if you're going to do it that way, then I understand why you would not be giving them the draft. I was thinking, if you're going to say at the end of the discussion, oh, does anybody think there's anything else in there we should include? And then they're like, well, I don't have that again. And I realize they already have it, but it's just so much easier for people to think logically if they have it all together.
Yeah,
Right, but I think.
I personally, I was all afternoon, and I just caught it was digging a deeper hole for myself the more I was going through this in great detail. And I just don't want the other guys to go through that same thing. To look at it for ideas, great, but let's just focus on the major points. And I think it'll be more productive for us, and then we'll better be able to find consensus than going through this paragraph by paragraph saying, well, I don't like this wording for this reason.
Right.
And we're arguing about,
I mean-
we're not arguing, we're discussing something that may never even come up, especially when it's an application, because the people who are doing it in a permitted use, they don't have to make an application.
Yeah, I don't mind the draft as just being a reference point, but yeah, I mean, to stray away from that and just make sure we're gonna be on topic. Because I know, with this ordinance, we've been breaking off into a lot of tangents and
Right.
stuff, so.
And the way I did it once before for an ordinance that was in front of us, and then we ended up deciding it wasn't even necessary to have the ordinance, is I went through paragraph by paragraph by paragraph, so that we knew we'd gone through the whole thing, and we all knew if we agreed or not. And my intent would be, once we give Mary a outline of what we want, then what she comes up with, we would go through line by line by line to make sure that we think it's clear, concise, and doesn't contradict the UDO and such. So we would do that at the end, but I don't think this is a good starting point, even though this may have been a good starting point to make us talk and make us think. This is not good in my mind to go through line by line and try to change it.
Not yet.
Well, not this at all.
Right.
But ultimately, when we get a new one based upon the main points, yeah, that's where I want it. I think should be done at the end. Now, if I get outvoted, that's fine. I'm just bringing up my ideas. I'm not saying that it has to be my way, but that's how I'd like to work. Okay, that's,
One other thing that I do want to mention tonight is, we do have that pre-annexation petition from the owners of the property 1515 South Meridian, which is long haired by Walter. And want to be able to schedule a public hearing for the next zoning board meeting so we can get that advertised. So, if you don't have any objection, I would say that we should have Mary go ahead and do that, because
Is that application going to be on the new application form?
We're not utilizing the zoning application form because it's not been approved by the village board, right?
Right, I think we're to that stage, yeah.
Right.
Village,
Because I think there were some modifications to
I
it.
think we discussed the UDO, conflict with the UDO in the old ordinance, right? So we put that on pause, is that why?
yeah, and then also, because you said, isn't it, that it's for pre-annexation,
Mhm.
right? And that's its own form, which we've had for
Right.
some years.
And is this gonna require notification to property owners and such?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the problem I have, in that I don't wanna have another hearing when the notice wasn't given out properly.
Right, but in the past, the village has been responsible for sending out the notice. So typically, that's what we do, and that's the way it will continue to be. The village will send out the notice.
So these last two, we didn't because it's
Because of,
that's the only reason I would want to say no to what you're suggesting. Because if we schedule it for the public hearing, I don't have an objection to that, but if we show up for the public hearing, like we did last time, and there wasn't proper notice given out,
Right.
I'm gonna be inclined to say, I wanna pull the public hearing off. I'm guessing from what Mike was saying last time, he would agree, and so that we,
but
I just wanna make sure it's done properly, so as long as,
We're going back to the old way.
The village is responsible for doing it. No, from here on to the end of eternity, whatever.
Yeah.
The village will be responsible. Now, whether we charge somebody to do it or not, that's a village.
that's a different
decision.
issue. Yeah.
But the village will be doing it from here on out. And once we get our zoning petition in place, zoning application in place, we will also address the pre-annexation and determine what type of fee is also for pre-annexation. Now, the reason why I felt we shouldn't charge anything for pre-annexation is it benefits the village. When I was at a church in Rockford, we were on the west side of Rockford, and we weren't in the city of Rockford. We wanted to be part of Rockford to get water. Guess what? Kathy Ellett, who was the city attorney at the time, she said, Frank, here's the application. All you gotta do is sign it. She printed it all up for us. I signed it as a board member and give it back to the city. And the next thing I know, they said, yeah, you're now annexed into the city. Didn't have to pay anything, didn't have to do anything. The city of Rockford covered everything. That's the way I think it should be for pre-annexation, because if we tell these people, you gotta pay the $250 plus this fee, plus that fee, plus that, they're gonna say, you're crazy. We're going to the city of Rockford, they're not gonna charge us a darn thing. So that's my village
Yes.
board view is, we're gonna pay for that. So we're gonna leave that the way it is. Your perspective from the zoning application, I agree. If somebody comes in to zone something that's already in the village, they should pay for it because there is a cost for them to ask for the change.
And I'm not disagreeing with you there. It's just certain things that I feel the zoning board should at least consider. And if a consensus agrees, we pass it on to the village board, then they say yes or no. You've raised a good reason there for not having a fee for that. And I wasn't so much thinking of the fee, I just was thinking of the notice. So I have no problem putting it on the agenda, so long as all the proper notice is given.
But now this is going to be on, because we don't have the application, I mean, you do, but we're waiting for the
I'm waiting for the
legal.
legal, and I'll get that this week.
But we're talking, then we have to do the zoning first, because we can't just have and I might have written it down, wrong. I
Correct.
thought you were
So-
saying the public hearing on the
Public hearing for the zoning.
pre-annexations, for the zone.
So that's why I'm talking about it tonight,
Yep.
because we need to have it on the zoning at the main zoning board meeting, so then we can maybe address it at the main zoning board meeting, when we have the public hearing 5 minutes before. So,
I'm just thinking of the date.
right, so it's May 15th, 22nd.
But there were things in the application that they were supposed to have before.
Pre-annexation application, yes, I've got everything except for the legal.
Right, because I remember Mike saying that he had the 2 packets and they weren't complete. And I was agreeing, let's proceed anyway, and I don't want to do that again because it didn't work. So as long as everything's there, that's fine. If it's not there, for what it's worth, I'm going to object because I don't think it should be on, there shouldn't be a public hearing unless it's proper. I don't want to proceed to it if we don't have everything in front of us and all the notice given that's supposed to be given.
Okay, our next zoning board meeting is the 28th, is that right? Because it's the, am I missing something?
It was probably the fourth.
One,
It's the 4th, isn't it?
Isn't it the first, the 8th?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking on Sunday, my bad.
Is that
22nd, or, yeah, that's the Monday. So is 5/22. Oh, because of when things have to go.
So the application has been filled out.
The application's been signed, filled out. It's in my possession. I wanted to bring it up here, but I don't have the legal description. It has to be attached, but I'll get that, I'm hoping tomorrow, and then I can bring it up on Wednesday. But yes, it's already been signed by the applicant, petitioner.
And what documents do they have to include with that?
There is,
Pursuant to ordinance.
I believe they have to have a depiction of the area that's gonna be, pre-annexed or annexed in, which is attached.
A drawing or a?
Windows aerial view.
Okay,
And it outlines it in red.
okay.
And then, I don't know if they have to, but I do have the addresses of all the neighbors within 250 feet. I think that's something that is.
That they're supposed to do, but now the village is gonna take that over, when in the
But
past.
that'll be attached as an exhibit.
Right.
So it'll be.
They're supposed to come up, they're supposed to,
provide it.
they're supposed to provide it.
And they
But
have.
you're telling me the village is gonna double check that and make sure it's accurate and send out the notices?
Yeah.
Okay,
Like in the past.
And we do have the ability through Winjust to verify that, which I've done, but then Mary can triple check it.
okay, so long as that's all done.
Yeah.
I won't have a problem proceeding, otherwise, just a heads up.
Yeah.
I just felt uncomfortable doing it and then not having it work.
Absolutely.
So, just so you're aware too, because of the publication, when we have our meeting like this, it requires, and so I don't know if you're gonna have everything, I have to have it then to the newspaper by Friday, the
Okay,
28th,
okay,
because they publish on the 4th.
Yeah.
And it has to be not less than 15 nor more than 30, and when I was doing my counting,
I'll take us to the 19th.
yep,
So anytime after the 19th, we can do it. So you have to
When do the
have, we have to
notices
have the
have to be sent?
pre-annexation available by the 4th of May, right? For the public to see.
I have to have it to the newspaper. I have to have it to the newspaper by the 28th for the public to see on the 4th.
Yep. Okay.
And then you said for the property owners, then I do it with the, not less than, for the zoning, not less than 15 or more than 30 for them. But remember, theirs is, I don't have the same publication issue with them.
You can
So
send it at any time.
I have more time with them because in essence, I'm getting it to the newspaper a week before they publish. Just because
Right.
that's the requirement.
Okay.
So just so you know, that's what the story is.
I don't have any problem with that being on the agenda then, under that scenario.
And
This is
what's
probably
the,
Not decided, so he's in agreement.
can I get then even, well, I guess I'm gonna need that anyway, but what's the zoning gonna be, or what's it going from to?
Same thing, it's the same thing. It's gonna be, I think, is it heavy industrial or?
I.
No, it's general. It's,
Can I ask one more? Is there a reason why we have to hurry this through from their standpoint? Well, what's the difference to them if we do it in June after we have everything?
The only thing is, they're working on putting up a building, and they are working with the county, but they would like to transition over as quickly as they can.
Because they wanted.
So they got
the
something
village
going.
is building official.
So again, what were you,
I was asking what the zoning was in the county that we're then trying to change to the village.
so they are. General industrial, IG.
Right.
And they want to go to general industrial district number 4 for the village.
So general industrial, two county, two districts, four. General industrial. in the village.
Is there particular building official issues? I mean, is the village more lenient in some
I asked
particular
them to
way?
review the UDO, I asked them to talk to, our building inspector to see if there were any issues that are different. Part of it was just they filed for the permit and something wasn't included in the permit, so then they started doing what they were doing, and then they came back and the building official said, sorry, by the way, you were supposed to have done this, and they said, well, you never told us to in the permit, I know that was our mistake, but we now need you to do it. So they were frustrated that the county, had an oversight and could have caused some major problems. So that was part of the reason why they're like, we don't want to deal with the county anymore, because we didn't like that being.
Okay, and I understand why the village would like a pre-annexation, I agree with that. The tax base for the fire department and everything, that makes sense to me. And I don't have any real qualms about them trying to avoid the county building ordinances for the village. I don't have any horse in that race. I was just wondering if there's one building issue in question that they're trying to do an end run around.
Right.
I guess I would hope the village would want to look at that to make sure that the village thinks it's a good idea that they don't have to do that.
Right.
I would hate to, they're trying to avoid something that's a good idea and the village, we'll bring you in, now they're avoiding something that they really should have done.
Well.
It's just they want,
They
they're
have
kind of fed up with how it worked, okay.
That's the main reason, but again, they have to follow our guidelines. And our guidelines could be stricter, I don't know. But that's why I told them, I gave them copies of the UDO, specific things. I said, do you want to look at the whole thing? But I said, here's this. I said, we may be stricter, we may be more lenient, we may be exactly the same way. So you need to figure out on your project where you fit in with the village. And that's up to you, but no, they want to move forward. So they may have other reasons why that they didn't explain to me,
Okay.
but.
I was just curious why it had to happen so quickly.
I think
I think part of it is too, because Rod came in, he's wanting to come in, I think they want to come in too, because they're right up the street. And they know that Brower Trucking across the street from right there on Meridian, they were told to go to Rockford because they would be more lenient than the county. And so they went to Rockford so they could build what they wanted to, again, instead of coming to the village, because they weren't told to come to the village, they were told to go to the city of Rockford. So I think these people are like, you know what, we'd rather go to Winnebago than Rockford, and we don't want to be basically controlled by the county when it comes to the building permits. We'd rather have the village do it. So that's my understanding.
Okay.
They're more small, community-minded. They're from Cherry Valley area. They would rather work with the village of Winnebago. They'd rather be good neighbors. So that's another reason why they wanted to come into the.
And I think they see, maybe not these individually, but that when you're working with a small community like ours, you're more likely to possibly get a special meeting set, where you're not going to get that in the county, they're not going to set that up for you. You do what you tell them, you do by the guidelines, you don't hit the guidelines, you're at the next meeting, go away. And so I think maybe that's part of it too for some people.
No, I think so. I think it's the personal connection and the ability to have, do things in person more and get better feedback, I think is what they're looking for. Very nice people. Met with them for a while. So I think they'd be.
Okay, well, it's just when it's hurry, it makes me wonder why.
Right, yeah. No, and well, everyone I deal with is in a hurry. You know, I mean, it's just the nature of it, and, you know, there's times when you can accommodate it, there's times when you choose not to. This one, you know, looking at the overall thing, if we can accommodate it, I would like to. If we can't, we can't, but I think their time frame it would work better if we could. That's just, so, but I completely understand though, you know, we would rather have everything completely in place, have a meeting with them, and then move forward. But it doesn't always work that way.
But it seems there's been more often than not, we do it the other way.
Yeah.
And we're stubbing our toes.
Right.
And, I've been thinking I needed something else. I did get an email or text, whichever, from the Ackermans. I think we had 12,000 square feet or something.
Okay.
So they did measure the blacktop area. I think that maybe June might be a good idea to put that on the agenda. That would give him additional time to he wants to talk to the Casper Village zoning, building person. And, you know, whether he needs to make any changes, like I told him, if you don't think you need a variance, then so be it. You know, look at the ordinance, based on that square footage that says what you have to have. If you need a variance, I think as Mary said, he needs to let us know what he wants to vary.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to bring him back in because that's something I think we need to finalize.
Yeah.
One way or the other. And I think it's gonna work, but.
Yeah. You know, I think we should set it for June, and I suppose, don't we have to have a public hearing do we need a public hearing?
My recommendation to him would be that if he thinks he needs a variance, he withdraws his current application and reapply for a variance.
Okay, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't know that he submitted sufficient evidence to prevail.
Correct. And that
And
was,
I think it's cleaner that way, because their application wasn't as complete as it should have been. And I don't know if at that time we didn't have an application form for him to use or what.
no,
And so maybe if we did have the application form now, he fill out the new form, tell us why he needs a variance and to what extent he needs a variance, then we can have a public hearing on that variance. I
As
think
I,
that's a cleaner way of
yeah,
proceeding.
but as I recall too, I believe that the form does have questions are directly related to the findings that we have to make,
correct,
that ask them to give information.
Correct.
And that was not provided.
correct. So the application,
What he
The
submitted
final-
some time
the
ago.
final application would have that in there, so they know what they need to present.
I think they should start over, so withdraw that and then have a new application and have a public hearing. I think it's a better way to proceed as opposed to just having scheduling a continued public hearing or additional public hearing on the application that they have, which really didn't say anything.
And then Kelly, just thinking about it, can you check the community development minutes? Because that may be where we had talked about the zoning application. Maybe they came up with an idea as to what needs to be changed. So I don't know, Jason had looked at it and, you know, I don't know if you remember Mary.
I'm trying to remember.
Because I'm pretty sure it came up in front of a committee to review it, and there were suggestions made that, hey, this may not apply, that may not apply. You need to go back to the drawing board with a couple of items. So I don't know if you can look through the minutes and see if it happened at a community development meeting where we addressed the zoning ordinance, and then it was suggested that it be modified.
You mean the zoning application?
Zoning application, correct. And then if you do find that, forward it to me, please, and that'll redirect me, because then I will take a look at the zoning application, make those suggested changes, and then bring it back to both the zoning board and to the committee.
Did,
And it is 12,000 square feet of driveway.
Okay.
And he says he's got 2,760 square feet of grass area.
Now, did that go just to you, or?
I'm guessing it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he had called me asking me an unrelated question that was in front of the village board.
Okay.
And I took that opportunity to remind him that I still wanted something to be done, and he hadn't gotten back to me. And so he said he would give me the square footage. So that's just the two of us.
Okay.
And so I would expect him to present that to us.
And maybe too, if that's something you could forward so that the zoning board has, I just remember that Mr. Booker had asked, where are we at with that, and
Okay,
just so everybody knows.
Should we forward it to him?
Yeah, if he forwards it to Kelly, then.
well, let's see if I can do that.
If appropriate, could I just excuse myself for the
Sure.
night, if this isn't a
Yep.
official meeting? or-
This is just brainstorm.
I know, though, yeah, I know where.
Yeah, we can probably just interview.
Yes.
Just a reminder that I believe there's a special zoning
They-
meeting on the 8th.
Right, yeah, special zoning meeting on the 8th. Molly, thanks for you for attending, and we do have a special zoning board meeting on the 8th, but it's not going to apply to the solar ordinance. It's just applying to a public hearing on 2 items for, they want to change zoning for pre-annexation purposes, and so it'll be like a 5-minute board meeting.
Okay, sounds, all right,
You have a
thank
good
you.
evening. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.